Ordinarily, I would take a break now and get my thoughts more together, but I'm wary of the time, and I expect you folks are keen to hear. Um, I see as clear as day that Cecile Druzba was indeed the sun in the universe of her family and her friends and her community. Those are astounding photographs that you've shared. And it's astounding to me that you, Mr. Druzba, could sit and talk about her as you did. That was incredibly brave. It's clear to the court that she was kind and generous to all, that she was a model of purpose in her life, that she was a model of laughter and compassion and love, and that she was full of a vitality and vital to everyone around her. The light of that sun went out in a horrific crash early in the morning on a stretch of open road in farm country in this county, where one moment she was having a pleasant drive with her brother, and the next moment there's just this awful, awful event. And it was all because Mr. Labounty was sleepy at the wheel. And that was on account of he had had a late night, early morning, had partied the night before, and he was having trouble staying awake. And he kept going. Doing that, fighting that losing battle with staying awake, he turned his car into a lethal weapon, just as Miss Graysick said. That was gross negligent operation. The question here is now what to do about the loss of that incredible woman, and how to respond in some measured way to an immeasurable loss. As Miss Graysick noted, I've had to do this a couple times, and these are the absolute worst cases to try to sort out. As she also pointed out, the court is required to think about punishment, deterrence, rehabilitation. And when I think about each of those things, it matters a great deal to the court, as it does and has to Mr. Druzba, whether Mr. Labounty has truly taken responsibility and accountability for what happened. And it's one of the tragedies of our system that, as Mr. Sawyer noted, that's very, very hard to do, if not impossible, until now. And here we are 3 years later, And the Druzba family and friends have had this prolonged, unresolved event uh, that makes it no surprise in the court's mind that it's a bitter pill that it didn't get sorted earlier, and that they weren't able to come to a resolution earlier, and that they've had to wait this long. And at this point, it's pretty darn tempting to say, just throw the book at it. We've waited long enough. I also heard loud and clear, especially from Mr. Druzba, that Cecile would not have wanted that. That she would, then and now, as we've heard a lot, want something good to come of her death. And I'm really struggling with that. Because even now, there is a process by which something good could come of her death. Even now, there is a restorative justice program that could engage Ms. Druzba's family and Mr. Labaudy in a meaningful way, and would involve structuring what it is he does by way of community service, and what it is he does by way of expressing his remorse, and what it is he does by way of accountability. None of that happens in jail. Zero, none. Likewise, in the world of rehabilitation, if that happens in jail, it's a spontaneous event. Court has been advised by the state that on account of they assess Mr. Labaudy as a low-risk offender, he would not be qualified for any programs in jail. He would just sit. You might ask why that is. You have to ask somebody else. That's just the way resources are allocated. I appreciate deeply what Mr. Druzba acknowledged. The truth that I suspect all of us know in our hearts and minds here, that there was no evil here. There was no intent on Mr. Labaudy's part to hurt anyone, ever. He made some really, really bad choices that had immeasurable consequences. But it was not a function of evil intent. Again, by way of rehabilitation, the court has thought hard and wished that either before now or now, there could be a meaningful restorative justice program. That's where I think the things that the Druzbas are desperate for might, and more than might, happen. I've thought about deterrence because that's what I am required to think about. And in the absence of intent to hurt someone, and where I think we've all acknowledged, or the folks I've heard have acknowledged, even Mr. LeBounty's going to have to serve a sentence here for the rest of his life, just living with what he did. And that's going to be the strongest deterrent from him doing anything like this again. There's also the prospect of general deterrence out to the world. That if the world got the message and really heard that if you do something like this, you're going to go to jail for a bunch of years. And oh, well, I don't want to do that then. And I bet the former prosecutor, as well as the current prosecutor, would acknowledge in an honest moment that that's just not how the world thinks. They don't listen that way. I don't think anyone's ever seen any research that shows that they do. So I'm not particularly persuaded about deterrence. I'm not particularly persuaded about rehabilitation in terms of jail time. I do wish tremendously that there was a way to steer this case into a restorative justice program. And I'm concerned that with the 2 or 3 years of jail, that when Mr. LeBounty emerges from that, whether that's actually 18 months or 30 months or whatever it turns out to be, that everyone's motivation to engage in that hard work then will be at least much less than it is now. Not that it could never happen, but try to put myself in the shoes of the family. And at that point, I'd be, why would I want to go back through that now? I've been trying to heal for the last 2 or 3 years. Please just let me heal. So I'm back to the world of punishment. I don't think this has anything to do with rehabilitation. I don't think it has anything to do with deterrence. I don't think it has anything to do with anything except punishment. And I feel like I have a duty to respect what the state and the victims are asking for in this case. They have paid a price. The family has paid a price that is beyond my imagination, even to start thinking about. And I can start to think that maybe the fact of punishment will be in its own way healing for them. I don't like to think that way, but I can imagine it's possible. And if there's a possibility of healing, I'm gonna reach for it. So, having thought that through, and again, wishing we were crafting a sentence that opened the door to Mr. Labouty teaching other people about what's happened here and somehow building a bridge with the family that's suffered so much. I don't see that's going to happen. I am going to impose a sentence of 3 to 5 years, split to serve 2. With a term of probation of 10 years. The terms of probation, the standard conditions A through E, condition 4, which is that you shall not purchase, possess, or use any regulated drug without a valid prescription. And if you have a prescription, you must take your medication only with the dosage and manner prescribed. So I managed to lose my list. Condition 5, that you'll keep your probation officer advised of all your current prescriptions and sign waivers to allow him or her to verify them. 7, that you'll submit to random urinalysis testing for drugs upon request of your probation officer or his designee. 10, that you would submit to a warrantless search of yourself, your things, your home, or your vehicle if your probation officer has a reasonable suspicion that you possess drugs in violation of these conditions. 13B as in boy, that upon your release on probation or that you'll be screened for substance abuse and you'll follow through with any additional treatment that the PO requires. 14, you'd sign any waivers. To allow your PO to track that. And I'm gonna stop there. I had thought about community service. I thought hard about it. I'm convinced that Mr. LaBounty is going to pursue that in his own way with the Knights and otherwise. And as I said, I thought about the reparative justice program, but after serving that much time, I don't see the point of putting the family through that, honestly. So any questions about that?
Just wanted to see if we could get a check-in date, maybe even just a day, that he could get his stuff together and say goodbye to his family.
It's crazy.
The state would object to that, Your Honor. The state believes and has indicated to Mr. Sawyer quite some time ago that Mr. LeBounty would have plenty of notice to prepare for today and that he should go today. It has been 3 years. We've also known of the sentencing date. I believe it was February 7th. And we communicated that back in September that we expected he should go from.
So I appreciate this is hard news, Mr. LeBounty, but I am going to remand you to the custody of the department now. That's all right. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
We did spoke. Thank you. Sure, Tom.
All right,